to have lunch, and I said,
the office of the Prime Minister.
This is not about electronic voting. We're not there yet. Again, maybe sometime in the future we may get there. But we are not here debating electronic voting. This is legislation. This legislation does not introduce online voting, nor does it introduce digital ballots or any form of voting by electronic devices. The process of casting and counting votes remains entirely manual. What we are modernizing is how we register the vote, or how we register voters, how we verify identity, and how we protect the integrity of the roll. Biometric voter cards and electronic poll books are tools to strengthen the front end of the electoral process, not to alter how one votes or casts their votes or how those votes may be tabulated. I came to have lunch and I said I might as well see
We're
how
from
the two
Louisiana. We were here tonight.
Oh, great.
This meet and greet wasn't part of the tour, but it did mark a huge wave for a small business. 1,000 tours and counting, Demetrius Hepburn proudly proclaims the rising tide that floats all boats is his personal story of success.
So far we've done 1,000 cruise ship passengers in that 1 month. You know, it would take us about a year to see 1,000 passengers, and we did it professionally with no complaints, no cries. Everybody enjoyed the tour completely. The Carnival is impressed with our product, and we're trying to do that every month.
It's the direction the Davis administration is steering new entrepreneurs into, one business at a time.
I was here when they opened. In fact, I think I spoke and opened this company for him. And at that time, if he was getting 3 or 4 per day, it was remarkable. And so for the perseverance, the resilience and the consistency, he built his own, the boats you see that he uses, he builds himself. Again, a part of telling us what Bahamians can do once provided the opportunity. That's what my government is about.
Another day, another dollar for cruising adventures and an experience worth every penny.
We love
back
coming
here?
to the Bahamas.
Love coming to Bahamas.
So I'll
Thank
see you again then.
Yes, we
Oh,
will.
Welcome.
absolutely,
You will.
you
Okay.
will.
The Office of the Prime Minister Press Office is the primary liaison between the Fourth Estate and the Office of the Prime Minister and Cabinet.
Every day, we're working to build a more inclusive economy and a stronger, safer country.
Hear all of the latest developments as the Davis administration carries out the broad mandate of progress and change. Our live weekly press briefings provide full access to current newsmakers on the most topical issues of the day. We facilitate prompt responses from cabinet ministers on the latest reports and get answers on the issues that matter to you.
Will any penalties be levied against the
OPM Press Now, keeping you in the know. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Office of the Prime Minister and our weekly press briefing. It's good to see all of you as usual. This morning we are going to focus on matters related to the Inland Revenue Department. Controller Shonda Strawn has joined us this morning, and she will cover topics ranging from the back-to-school VAT holiday, which is obviously a relief for parents as we prepare for back to school. She will also touch on matters related to Airbnbs and the policies surrounding them, as well as other matters. Without further ado, I'd welcome her to the podium, Ms. Shonda Strawn.
Well, good morning, everybody. Always a pleasure to be back with my media friends, back in the house. And so this morning, as Ms. Adley said, we're going to move around a bit. We're going to talk about several things inland revenue is. So we like to say back in inland revenue, what's in revenues or revenues. And so there are several things out there. Well, from what I saw in your news, several weeks ago, there was an article relative to short-term vacation properties, short-term vacation rental properties. We like to say Airbnbs. Really, there's been no new amendments or no new legislation governing Airbnbs or the short-term vacation rentals. It's pretty much the same as it's been for more than, I would say, 2 years now. There were some major changes in 2023, but pretty much everything is the same as it was. I think what got the flurry going was several weeks ago, the Department of Inland Revenue sent out notices. And so the general public, mostly, or I should say all property owners, received notices from us relative to Airbnbs or short-term vacation properties. So we just wanted to clarify a bit because that caused quite a stir out there in the community. First of all, we need to be mindful of two things. If you're in the area or the industry, in the business of renting properties to visitors on a short-term basis, there are two types of registrations you need to keep in mind. Two. One is registration simply for information purposes. So the Department of Inland Revenue implemented more than 2 years ago, in 2023, a short-term vacation portal. Now, this portal is not just an inland revenue portal, it's really the portal used by the government. And so the purpose of the portal really is to gather information. And so if you're in the arena of renting properties on a short-term basis, the government needs to know that you're in that arena. So by and large, we need to know that you are renting properties. Again, this first registration does not mean that we're taxing you, all right? So I want Bahamians to especially realize that just because you're renting properties does not mean that you're going to be taxed. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But all short-term vacation rental owners, whether you're Bahamian, whether you're foreign, whether you have a property on the Family Islands or in New Providence, it doesn't matter where, you should register your properties in the short-term vacation rental portal. And again, what that does, it allows the government to gather information on who's participating in the arena. That information is not only used by Inland Revenue, it's used by the Ministry of Tourism especially, because they really regulate that arena. But it's used for different reasons. Like, for example, if the government is going to give grants to persons in that arena, I'm sure you will be mindful or you're aware that several, maybe months ago now, the government gave grants to persons who have short-term properties on the Family Islands, and that went pretty well. Matter of fact, the Minister of Tourism, Deputy Prime Minister, said how well that program went and that they really plan to do it again. And so if you're going to benefit from the government's initiatives in the whole industry of short-term vacation rental, you need to register with us in the portal so that we know that you're out there. So registration is really, really important. And again, it doesn't mean because you're registered that we're going to tax you. So that's number one. So number one, everybody needs to register in the short-term vacation rental portal. And it really helps, too, the government to promote the expansion of that whole industry. And so we are all about bettering the tourism product. And we know that there are not enough beds out there, not enough rooms. And so if you register, it also helps us to understand or to get a feel for what other islands need more properties and where the government needs to go to provide benefits or incentives for Bahamians that want to participate in that area. Now, number two, registering for tax purposes. So I think, and that's what kind of got most Bahamians said, hold on, I get this notice, they're trying to tax me. But no, not really. You kind of got the notice because we are actively trying to determine who is renting property. And so there were several things that prompted us. And so really, everybody who got the notice, it doesn't mean that we're planning on taxing you. Because again, on average, Bahamians do not pay taxes in the short-term vacation rental arena. And if you look at an example, I did a quick example just so you get a feel. Again, if you, just like how it is for all businesses, if your turnover is over 100,000, then yes, you need to be registered for VAT, and that would mean that you need a business license. But if your turnover in the whole area where you rent your property is under the $100,000 threshold, then no, we're not looking for you to register for VAT or have a business license unless you want to, for some reason or the other. So in an example that we did, let's say you're a Bahamian. Let's say you're John Brown, and you live on the island of Exuma, and we know all on Exuma are properties that are being rented as Airbnbs, as we like to say. So if you're John Brown, you own a property, Exuma, and you rent this property out. Let's say you rent it out for $200 per night, and you rent it for a full 365 days out of the year. Well, your turnover, $200 a night for a whole 365 days out of the year, your turnover will amount to something like $73,000. So we're not looking for you to be registered for VAT or even to have a business license unless you voluntarily want to have a business license for some other reason and you voluntarily want to register for VAT. We're not forcing you to. However, if you have a turnover in excess of $100,000, then, like everybody else with that type of turnover, you should be registered for VAT. And if you're registered for VAT, you have to have a business license. So turnovers over $100,000, if you're Bahamian, yes, you do need to register for VAT and have a business license, because then if you're renting, let's say, the same John Brown in Exuma is renting properties at $300 per night, then that bumps up his turnover to like $109,000. Then he should be registered for VAT. All foreigners, it doesn't matter what their turnover is, all foreigners have to be registered for VAT and have a business license. So if you are not a Bahamian and you own a property that you rent as an Airbnb, then you have to have a business license, you have to be registered for VAT, even if your turnover is $1. It doesn't matter what your turnover is. Also, if you're a Bahamian company, we expect that you would be registered with a business license and registered for VAT. And so we wanted to make those distinctions because by and large what we're seeing, we noticed that there are over 20,000 short-term vacation properties throughout the Bahamas that we have flagged. I know there are more, but that's just what we have discovered. And out of that amount, we would say only about 20% of them are really registered on the short-term vacation portal. It should be 100%. Only 20% registered on the short-term vacation portal right now. And only 15% that should be paying VAT are registered for VAT. And that is a concern. And so in 2023, the government engaged the services of a foreign company, and that company was also on the notices that we sent out, called Avenue Insights. And again, they were not engaged to deal with Bahamians, but really to help us to determine the foreigners that are in the arena of short-term vacation rental. And so they partner with us. They help us by what we call scraping all of these sites that you go on, VRBO and the Airbnbs. And so from the work that they've done, that's how we are able to determine there are more than 20,000 properties out there. We think it's more, but we're concerned to at least get the 20,000 registered on the short-term vacation portal, and those that need to be registered for VAT, we're trying to get them registered for VAT. And so that was the purpose of the notices being sent out. It was really to get Bahamians to help us to kind of get that whole arena in line. And if you're a Bahamian and you got a notice and you don't have a short-term vacation rental property, that's fine. It means that we know that there's a property being rented somewhere on your corner maybe, or somewhere in your vicinity. Or maybe you have a property that has those new fancy key punches, you know, these new locks now, not key lock, but key punch locks. So there's several things that triggered us. And that kind of gives us clues that properties in a particular area are being rented. And so we're asking for our partners' help, the Bahamian people, we're asking for your help, and just helping us to know who's in the business of renting properties. And we're hoping by doing that, we will really be able to expand the industry, help to incentivize the industry, of course, and to give benefits to those that want to participate in the industry of short-term vacation rental. And so for emphasis again, if you're foreign, you have to pay VAT if you're in that area. Bahamians, it depends on the level of business that you're involved in. We're not looking for you to be registered unless your turnover is over 100,000, but everybody has to register in the short-term vacation portal. So that's it for that topic. Now we're going to move into some amendments. And again, there were many amendments this time around that affected the Department of Inland Revenue. And so I'm just going to touch on one or two that I think may be of interest for you and that you may want to do some more, investigative reporting on. I don't know if you've been hearing about something called a provisional VAT invoice. No, everybody looking like, what's she talking about? Okay. So one of the amendments that was passed normally wouldn't affect the Department of Inland Revenue. It's called the Conveyancing and Law of Property Act. And so you need to go and look that up because that's not one of the ones that normally affect us. But it was amended. The Conveyancing and Law of Property Act was amended by repealing and replacing the Section 40 to that act. And what that now, the new Section 40 requires is that before you execute a conveyance, so if you're trying to buy property, before you sign any conveyance, you need to request from the Department of Inland Revenue an invoice. And that invoice gives the Department of Inland Revenue kind of knowledge that there's some property transaction about to occur or in the makings. And so you would submit to us information relative to the property that you're planning on purchasing. You give us an idea of the consideration value and some other information. So you'll sign on to a portal and fill out the forms that are there. Quite easy to fill out. And we will come back and we will issue you what's called a provisional VAT invoice. Now, the provisional VAT invoice is not meant for you to pay it. It is simply meant to trigger everybody that there is a transaction about to happen. And so once you apply to the Department of Inland Revenue through our portal, once you apply to us letting us know that you're about to execute a conveyance, we issue you a provisional VAT invoice, and then you could do all the other things that you would normally do, finish off your financing and all of that type of stuff, and then you eventually execute your conveyance. That comes into the Department of Inland Revenue, the conveyance that is, and then we will do the final assessment. And it's from that final assessment that you make your VAT payment for the transfer of the property. So I think what I want persons to be mindful of is you have to request, or I say apply for, it's not an application process per se, because you're going to get it once you submit the information. But once you request the invoice and you get the invoice, then you should carry on with your transaction. In other words, do not sign a conveyance prior to requesting that invoice. And the VAT assessed on property property transactions really now take precedent. So they will take precedent over the legal fees that has to be paid, precedent over any realtor's fees that has to be paid. The VAT has to be paid first. And so there are time stipulations as to once you execute a conveyance, of course, the VAT on that property transfer has to be paid within 180 days of the conveyance being executed. So that's very important. And it's a kind of big change. And we just want to make sure if you're buying a property, you're mindful because it's an additional step. Okay, moving along quite nicely. We're going to move into real property tax, just a minute on this. And it's for you to know that the definition for owner-occupied properties has changed. Again, it doesn't really affect Bahamians so much so that it affects foreigners. In case you don't know, anybody can qualify or can be granted the owner-occupied exemption once they live in their property and own it on a seasonal basis. That was the legislation pre-July 1. So prior to July 1, Bahamians, non-Bahamians, as long as you own the property and live there, you get the owner-occupied exemption. And what's the owner-occupied exemption? Nobody knows? No? Nobody owns a property? Well, if you own and live in your property, then your property is, I would say, capped. I shouldn't use that word because capped means something else. But you get the first $300,000 of the value tax-free, right? And also, if you have a very palatial property, your tax cannot go over a certain amount. And that's where the cap comes in. So what did the amendment do? The amendment now has put stipulations in place, again, for persons that do not live in their property, I would say at least half a year. And so no more can you fly into the Bahamas for a day and claim owner-occupied exemption. No more can you come to the Bahamas for a week and stay in your property and claim the owner-occupied exemption. You now have to reside in your property. There are 2 levels. The first level, 90 days. So if you reside there for 90 days, you do get the $300,000 tax-free. And to get the whole benefit of the owner-occupied exemption, you have to reside in the property for at least 183 days. So it means that you'd have to be in the Bahamas more than just a day that persons used to be able to capitalize on the exemption. All right, so that's kind of important, and I know persons will be curious as to why we took off the exemption, or why we're going to take off the exemption in 2026, especially if we notice that you don't reside in the Bahamas or in your property for the 180 days or the 90 days. All right, so now this is going to be a hot topic. I think this is going to be your favorite topic of the day. And this is on the business license side. So the business license amendment introduced a whole new section. And that's Section 9A of the Business License Act. So it didn't exist before. And Section 9A of the Business License Act really is geared towards anybody in the liquor business. If you're in the liquor business, there's now a whole new level of application, I could say, that you're going to have to go through. There is now the process of being registered. So prior to July 1, if you were in the liquor business. And what does it mean to be in the liquor business? It means that you sell liquor wholesale, retail, restaurant, bar, any of those types of establishments that really sell liquor. You now need to go through 2 steps before you're allowed to operate. Prior to July 1, you just required the business license. And you did whatever was required under the Business License Act to get a business license. But now, all entities within the liquor arena are required to be registered. So you have license, and now you have this new thing called registration. 2 things, 2 distinct things with 2 different processes, 2 different flows. And so with the insertion of Section 9A, it introduced registration requirements for liquor establishments. And again, it defines what is a liquor establishment. And like I said before, it's your bars, your restaurants, liquor stores, whether they be wholesale or retail. And also in the Business License Act was the insertion of what's called the 5th schedule of the Business License Act. That's a new thing. And the only thing the 5th schedule deals with is the registration of liquor businesses. And so some of the things that that schedule says is that it is now mandatory for a liquor business to have a certificate of registration and a business license. And so in order for you to get a business license or to get a business license renewed, so even if you have one already, even if you have a license already, you got to do the registration, right? And so there is a cost for registration, very, very small. It's just, I call it probably just an administrative cost. So it's $100 for liquor stores and $50 for everybody else, the bars and the restaurants and all of that. So what does this process look like? I know you're going to go and read up on the 5th schedule, but I just wanted to highlight 1 or 2 areas of the 5th schedule that I think people need to be mindful of. First part is if you want to open a business, let's say you don't have it yet, but you're planning on opening a liquor store, 90 days before you make that application to open that liquor store, you have to apply to be registered. So if Keishla wants to go open her new Keishla's Liquor Store, before she does that, if she's thinking about opening that liquor store, let's say she's planning ahead, and she's going to open that liquor store sometime in November, do the math, I don't know how to do it, 90 days prior to whenever in November, she has to come to the Department of Inland Revenue. And I say come, I don't mean come, I mean go through the portal, right? Because there's a portal for all of everything we do, there's some sort of portal that you use to come to us. So she'll have to make application for liquor registration. Now, I say license yet, liquor registration. And so she will come into the portal, make her application, and then Inland Revenue has to do some things. Inland Revenue has to notify the public that Ms. Keishla is planning on opening a liquor store through Bird Flu Alley, right? And we would have to publish to the public to let them know where this new liquor store is going to be. And not only do we have to notify the public, but we do have to get consultation or have consultation. And so the 5th schedule requires that if you are applying for a new liquor license, you have to apply for registration 90 days prior, and then the department has to do some things, which includes, aside from us checking out Ms. Keishla's character and making sure that she's going to be in the right location, she's not next door to a school or a church or those types of things. They're kind of normal things that physical planning would have done under the Business License Act. But there's a whole new set of requirements for the Department of Inland Revenue to carry out prior to registering a new liquor business. If you already have a liquor business and you're really only trying to renew your license, you still have to come back to the Department of Inland Revenue and you have to apply again for registration or the renewal of your registration. And I think that's going to be a major initiative, not only for the Department of Inland Revenue, but the general public just needs to be mindful that there is this new step that has to be carried out prior to applying for a business license. And so the things that Inland Revenue is going to consider when we make the determination as to whether or not the registration certificate should be granted, we're going to consider the concentration of liquor stores in the area that you're trying to open the liquor store in. Of course, as I said before, proximity to schools and places of worship, the suitability of the premises, and that's a new thing. That's something while our sister agencies, Physical Planning and Ministry of Works, paid attention to the structure and the location, we now have this new thing called the suitability of the premises. And I don't know if you're aware, there's some new types of businesses that opened since COVID. Ever drove past and just seeing people line up? You know you have takeaways, so Bahamians are accustomed to lining up to get food to a takeout window. But there's some new things that came about where you line up and you go to a liquor store and you're getting served through a window. And so that's something we're going to be very watchful of. And you pay attention to that because there are some new, I would say, restrictions that may be enforced for those types of businesses. So, while you have this new process, and of course the controller under Section 25 has the right to do all the other things like suspend and amend and cancel. There have been a lot of, I guess, complaints recently from persons in neighborhoods because of the noise, pollution, and that type of thing relative to liquor businesses that may be near to a community or near to a neighborhood. I call it noise pollution, where the music playing all night or that type of thing where you're really infringing on a community. So those are some of the things that Inland Revenue will have to pay attention to when we deal with the whole registration of liquor businesses. And then, of course, there will be rights of the establishment or the business owner because they can object to what we determine, what we have, let's say, granted, or maybe we've put a restriction on the business and they object to it. So there's a whole process of objection that brings some sort of fairness across the board, and it does give the business owner rights as well. Okay, so I think I've given you enough not so good news because none of you look pleased with me today. And so we're just gonna now talk about some good things and then I'll get off the podium. Of course, the best thing, and for Inland Revenue, our favorite time of year is because we get to say something good, is back to school. So the back to school, that holiday, is knocking at the door, and it begins on the 10th of August. And so we're excited about that because it's a time when not only the school children and the teachers and people in the educational arena get to benefit, but businesses need to pay attention as well, because I think it's a good time to buy like office supplies. People don't normally think about that, but they should think about that. So the 10th of August, bam, is the start, and it ends on the 6th of September. So that's a long time, almost a month. And so the usual things, all the usual things, you buy your personal computers and laptops and tablets, as long as the cost is under $3,000 a unit. So you could buy anything. So the school children, but also businesses, if this is a good time to kind of purchase, equipment for your business. So also computer-related things, accessories like keyboards and monitors and printers, all those types of accessories, as long as the unit cost is under $1,000 or $1,000 and under. All the regular school supplies, your pencils, books, and notebooks, and all those kinds of things. Also clothing, and there's no real restriction on clothing. So, because we do take into consideration teachers, they have to buy clothes too. And so we don't only limit it to uniform. Clothing and footwear, there's a limit on footwear as well. Tennis shoes, I think your footwear has to be under $200 or $200 and under per unit. The regular school bags and backpacks and all those good things. So the excitement is those are all going to be VAT-free. And so it's a good time to shop for back to school. The very last thing I want to say to you this morning is around the area of improvements. Inland revenue catches a lot of heat, right? I know complaints are always there about our response time, how difficult sometimes it is to use our systems, and downtimes with the systems and all that kind of thing, needing to have two sign-ins, like a sign-in for real property, a sign-in for VAT. And so I am happy to say that there's something coming. I'm just going to tell you it's coming, and it's called One Tax Bahamas. And One Tax Bahamas is going to be a grand initiative, because what it's going to do, it's going to really focus on the taxpayer's experience. For us, we want to stop saying taxpayer and we want to say our clients, right? So the government has really allowed the Department of Inland Revenue to improve its systems. And so you will be seeing a whole new look, a whole new feel, all centered around ease, of course, but really focusing on the taxpayer. So we've been listening to the complaints, like I say, that we've been getting on our service to the public. And that's really important to us, right? We really want to make sure that our taxpayers are not stressed when they're paying their taxes. And so One Tax Bahamas, you got to get used to saying that. One Tax Bahamas, it will mean ease. It will also mean simplicity for the taxpayer. And we're just looking forward to that. That's going to be coming. You're going to hear more about it towards the end of the year. Around September, things are going to start heating up. But we just want our taxpayers to know, we've heard you. Just be patient with us. We're going to come and we're going to make sure that, all of your complaints are dealt with. And One Tax Bahamas is going to be, I think, beneficial to all. And so that's it for me. I welcome any questions that you may have. Okay? Any questions? Sure.
Yes. I'm not sure if I missed it, but in terms of the liquor license registration, when will that become effective? And my second question is in regards to those seeking to renew their business licenses, correct? And now they're also going to have to apply for this registration. Will where their liquor store is situated now be reconsidered?
Good question. Let me do the first one. So it's already enforced, okay? The amendments came into force July 1. So July 1, 2025 was the start of liquor registration, right? So for us in the Department of Inland Revenue, we're now putting or finalizing the processes relative to this new amendment. And so if there's any new business making application, I would say we're going to put the process, or we're going to engage the registration process, right? But definitely, as of September, we're going to start publishing lists, right? Because what we're going to try and do is get ahead of the 2026 registration period, right? There are thousands. I can't begin to tell you how many but there are thousands of liquor businesses overall in the country. And it's not just for New Providence, right? So it's countrywide. So if you think about it, the businesses that have already gotten or are licensed already, the first thing that we need to do is now register them, right? And so you will begin to see the Department of Inland Revenue publishing lists to get feedback from the public as soon as the beginning of next month is when we will have our first list go out. And then we're gonna ask for feedback, right? And so it's already in process. It's already enacted. And so it's being carried out. Now, your second question was around entities that already have licenses. Well, they're already in a location. So having a license doesn't mean that you will be registered. Yeah? So if you're already in a location, Keishla is already through Tree Palm Street, and she now needs to apply for registration to get her renewal for 2026. Well, we have to follow what the act says in terms of registering her. So I don't know if she's going to get approved for registration. And if she's not approved for registration, then we can't approve of her license. Yeah? Okay.
So just to piggybacking onto your answer, Leo Roll, the president of the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce, that was his concern with pre-existing businesses, and what's going to be done for them because they already set up shop, they already had their money. Why would they then? Because his argument is, as you said, some of these things another agency is supposed to do, and his issue is why they're then having to have consequences for a lack of enforcement on the other agency part.
That's a very good question. One not for me to answer. But I'll say this to you. The Department of Inland Revenue is reasonable. We're reasonable in what we do. And let's say, for instance, you already have a liquor establishment, but we now deem your premises unsuitable, right? Your premises are not suitable, and so we're not going to register you. I don't know what that's going to look like. It probably will look like us, of course, going through a period of consultation. Can you amend your premises to make it suitable? But in any event, the Department of Inland Revenue has strict guidelines to follow, which we will follow. We have no choice. And once we follow them, if a decision is given and it's not a decision that the business owner can accept, there's a whole process of appeal, right? And so it's not just Inland Revenue that's gonna, I've heard out there, oh, Inland Revenue, do what they want. Absolutely not. First of all, the legislation was enacted. We're not involved in that just then. Our role is to carry out the laws that have been passed. And so we carry out the policies and procedures as is in our act. And if it is that the decision made by the department in accordance with those laws, those policies and procedures, is not a decision that the taxpayer wishes to accept, there is a whole process that they can carry out. So it's not, in other words, the buck does not just stop at Inland Revenue. So there is a process of review that does not include us.
So during that process, will businesses have to, I guess, cease operations during that time?
Possibly. Again, it depends. There are different scenarios. There are different stipulations as laid out in. I invite you to go and look at the fifth schedule because I didn't touch on everything. I just picked to get you curious, right? But look at the fifth schedule, and it gives a clear line of appeal, right? If you're not, like I said, accepting the decision of the department, then there is a process of appealing our decision.
This sounds like this is the beginning of the crackdown of these drive-through and takeout bars.
That's how it sounds.
Okay, I have three questions,
Sure.
Ms. Strawn. The first question is, what is the estimated amount you plan to get from these extra 20,000 people who have these Airbnbs?
I don't have a number for you, but we'll send something back because we do have estimates. I just didn't bring them, right? But it's not only value-added tax that we plan to get, but also business license. And then also real property tax as well, right? So again, you know, Bahamians do not pay taxes on the Family Islands. So no matter what you have built property-wise on the Family Islands, Bahamians do not pay real property tax. Let me get it correct. Bahamians do not pay real property tax on the Family Islands, right? The question behind, will they have to pay VAT and business license taxes? That depends on their turnover, right? But we know that there is a considerable amount of revenue that we're not getting. And for example, you have those Family Islands that we may not even have known that there was a property or an improved property being rented on the island. And now we're finding all of this out. So we do see considerable revenue from just compliance in that area.
Okay, my second question is, will this provisional license for VAT, for the conveyancing, be clear to realtors now? Because they said that there was no process of who
Yes.
should pay and when they should pay.
Yes, so the guidance notes will be issued. We've met with the Real Estate Association. We're going to be meeting with our legal friends to go over the process, because the process is really quite simple. I think there was a lot of back and forth around the word provisional invoice, right? Because the Act says that you have to have an invoice prior to proceeding with the execution of the conveyance. Well, you can't really have an invoice. It has to be a provisional invoice because you're giving us information prior to finalizing the conveyance. You could have really started the process off. Let's say maybe you have a sales contract or something that says the consideration value is one thing, but some other negotiations happened after that. And by the time you get to the execution of the conveyance, that consideration value changes. Then the invoice, the provisional invoice, will change as well, right? It could go up or it could go down. And so I think there was a bit of a delay in us issuing the process because we were really liaising with our partners on their concerns. We did not want to issue guidance notes if there was any part of concerned persons with issues that we felt warranted our looking at. So I think we have them all sorted now, and it's now an easy process. You just go into our portal, you request the invoice. It's an automated process, so you get a quick turnaround time. But really what the provisional invoice is going to do, we see a whole lot of conveyances that do not come in for stamping. Like you see them 20 years later, right? So like I'm looking back now, and you have, let's say you come in and you say, oh, I need an assessment number. I'm going to the bank to, get a mortgage to put in a pool in my yard. And you come, the bank tell you, well, now you have to have an assessment number on anything property related. So you come to us, hey, what's my assessment number for this? And we check and we're like, okay, we could give you this assessment number, but we don't see where this conveyance was ever stamped. So it puts you at jeopardy because your ownership in that property could be, suspect. So what it does, it alerts us sooner that a transaction is happening, and it then gives us, not only it protects the buyer of the property, but it also ensures that the government gets the taxes due to it from that transfer of property.
And you say these guidance notes are available already?
Yeah, they are. Everything is on the website. So go to our Inland Revenue website and you'll see the guidance notes on provisional invoice, or it may say the Conveyancing Law of Property Act. So it's there already.
Does the department have an estimated number or figure of bars and liquor stores in school zones and their churches?
We're doing that work now. So, yeah, we know. I just didn't bring that for you. But yes, we know. So that's kind of what we've been spending the last month doing. We ran a report, which had me holding my head. I didn't dream. I mean, I'm like stunned at the number of liquor businesses, especially in neighborhoods. Like you indicated, I like how you say the takeout liquor stores. I hear people call them cages. Yeah.
So it's safe to say there's an overwhelming amount.
Yes. So again, we get you some numbers. I'll let John send back some numbers because we have it. I just didn't bring it. Yeah.
Hi, back to the section 40 of the conveyancing and property tax law. I know a lot of real estate agents had, they were a bit perturbed at being included in the law because they don't really have anything to do with the conveyance process after it's already turned over to the real estate agent. So, and then they also had concerns that the new process would hinder them from getting their funds because they have to wait until this whole process is done. So I guess what do you have to say to them, and can you explain why they were included?
So we've already talked to them. So that was kind of what we were, like I mentioned earlier, we wanted to talk to our partners. And so we've talked to REIA, the Real Estate Association. So I think we've worked out a fair process that works for them and works for us, and a part of the process kind of now helps them, right? So we know that the realtors are involved in the beginning, right, prior to conveyancing. So they kind of introduce the buyer and seller. That's kind of how the role that they play. So they introduce, they connect them, and then they kind of step back and pray and wait for this whole deal to go through, because that's how they get paid, right? But what we kind of discovered is sort of like us in some cases where they may not know when that whole conveyance got executed and when funds changed hands. Sometimes they don't know. But what they do know is when they connect the two parties. And so for us, that is a good compromise that, okay, we understand that you may not know at the end, but tell us what you do know and when you know it. And then guess what? We will help you. Because now that we know, we can kind of help you in ensuring that you are not overlooked and not paid when the process gets completed. So we've worked out, I think, a good balance where we can work together in ensuring that the law gets carried out.
So what about the transactions that don't go through a real estate agent? Because I think about 40% goes through a real estate agent, and the others are done just between the buyers and the sellers. So
So again, go read section 40, because really it now says that a conveyance is not going to be legitimate, valid, unless you get that invoice, right? And so the law puts in place, it doesn't matter if you use a realtor or not, as long as there's a connection, a transfer and a transferee, a buyer and a seller, and you got to sign the conveyance. You can't get around that. If you transfer in property, for sure the conveyance have to be signed. But what that law says is it cannot be, or it should not be, conveyance that is, should not be executed without that invoice. And if it is, then it's not, is it legitimate? Check out section 40.
is there a concern for instances of fraud after this, this new law has come into power, people selling, properties and knowing that, hey, if we don't register this property within that revenue, then I just got myself a lump sum, because it's still my property?
Well, no, it ain't. I actually think the reverse is true. This stamps out a lot of fraud that is already happening, right? A lot of this, look, there's so much fraud now going on in the whole buying and selling of property. And this really helps to cut down on that, right? Because it ensures that all parties know about the transaction, not just the seller who getting the money, right? Or the buyer who think they got a steal of a deal, not knowing that property was already sold 2, 3, 4 times, never recorded, right? And now when that person has to go to court to fight for that property, guess what? It was recorded by somebody else. But had they gone through the process of submitting that conveyance to Inland Revenue for stamping, then that whole fraud situation could have been avoided. So this really is meant to kind of suppress or depress some of the fraud that happens. Of course, you know, we're very creative people. It won't get rid of all of it, but I think it will help with quite a bit of it.
My question is reverting back to the liquor license. I don't know.
I know you was gonna like that one. No, yeah, it's challenging.
To give it a timeline, how long could we expect from the time I wanted to register to when I get the okay or nay? Will it take? Because if I'm a business owner and I hear kids self-consultation, that's something that's an extra amount of time.
Well, the act says, again, go read the act. The act says 2 weeks. We have to give 2 weeks for consultation, right? So if it's a new, meaning you don't have a license yet, and you apply for registration, we have to give the public 2 weeks notice, right? So we have to give them notice. And I think that's why it says 90 days, right? Because 90 days it gives the department enough time to do what it has to do. You got to be reasonable. The department has to take some time out of that 90 days to do what it has to do, right? Because then we need to go and view the premises. We need to make sure that where you're planning on putting this liquor store is appropriate. And most importantly, we need to hear from the general public, right? I don't know if you're too young to remember, because I don't remember. But back in the day, we had the Liquor Licensing Authority, I think it was called. This kind of looks sort of like that, right? Where you had a panel that reviewed applications before they were granted. But it kind of looks something like that, similar to that.
That's my last question. This is my last.
All right, that's fine.
It's still on property. I know last year when we were here with you, you talked about the power of sale and the properties on auction. Can you say how that's going, how that's?
Yeah, it's going. All right, so we've had 6. We just closed Power of Sale 6, meaning the 6th bucket, right, that we issued, or the 6th publication that we had. So we've had 6 publications. We've had, I think it's something like more than 20 sales that are either in process or completed sales. And so it's going. It is not a fast process, because at the end of the day, there's no desire to sell a Bahamian's property. And that's really the very last resort, right? For us, it's not something that we're excited to do. We have to do it because we have to get the taxes. But it is taking a while, because we do still try and see what we can do for serious property owners that really intend to pay their taxes, right?
Do you think using in the 6th bucket, how much did you make, you think, on total from these powers?
We made quite a bit, more so from persons coming in to settle, meaning they don't want their property sold, and they'll come in. So as much as we said, we're not going to make any arrangements if we put you in the power of sale bucket, right? I mean, so we've made quite a bit relative to persons coming and paying or entering payment arrangements. From the sales, we've made a couple of $1 million, not as much as we had anticipated at this point. But again, it's because we are very cautious with the process, because once you sell it, it's gone, right? And so we will be publishing another list probably in another 2 weeks. We will have another list published. But it's been progressing. And we're going to move to something else, the selling of liens. So I think I mentioned that the last time I was here, and we're getting ready to release a lien bucket, which is really selling the debt to a third party.
So how much more properties are left on that?
Lots. So what that means is we have a lot of delinquent properties, meaning properties that have significant arrears. And I'm not talking about owner-occupied properties. We can go to power of sale for any property that is not Bahamian owner-occupied. We do have a concern that you'll probably see in the press soon on properties. Again, I back on short-term vacation properties because that's really a little issue for us. Properties being rented in the islands, but not rented or not being advertised or promoted by Bahamians, but by foreign realtors. So that's a concern, especially on like a Harbor Island and that type of thing. So stay tuned because you're going to see something in that area. Those property owners are not paying VAT, and they're all foreign owned. So that's a concern. Sorry. Oh, okay.
I was going to ask you about the real property tax collections. I know the government, they are making a big push.
They've been good.
Right.
So we send you.
So can you say how much that outstanding balance, I guess, that
It's still high. It's still high, but it's been going down, and I'm proud of my Bahamian people because they are taking real property tax really seriously now. We're seeing the shift, and I can only commend the people because I know it's a difficult thing. If you hadn't been paying it all along, to commit to paying it, and I'm like I said, I'm proud of those persons that come in, they make payment arrangements. And we've seen a lot of taxpayers who started off like, let's say, owing $30,000, owing like really large amounts. Just like I call it pecking at it and just staying consistent with it. Like I tell people, pay it like you pay your BPL bill. If you can't pay the whole thing, put something on it, right? If you make an effort, we will make an effort, right? We want Bahamians to own property. We want you to enjoy your property. But we do know that the taxes have to be paid. So if you come to us and make an effort, we will work with you.
have you seen the same compliance with foreign property owners as well?
Not as good, actually, as I've seen with the Bahamians. It could be a lot of them aren't hearing enough from us. It's difficult because you'd be surprised to know how many foreigners purchase property way back. I have so many of these cases that come to us where, grandfather purchased these properties back in the 40s, back in 1960 something, and they passed on. Children have no interest. They don't even know where the Bahamas is. They don't care about these properties. But they're there. So you're going to see a lot of them on the power of sale listing, right? A lot of properties in the family islands. So it could be better. But again, the area that I'm concerned about, and I'm pleading with Bahamians to help us, is that short-term vacation rental arena. If you are on an island and only foreigners renting properties around here, then you need to help us make sure that they are paying the taxes that is due to you. That's your tax, right? They're in your country, and if they're in your country, they need to pay the taxes. You have to pay it. I have to pay it. So we need to make sure that those non-Bahamians are paying their fair share, especially in that, man, if you look on some of these websites and you see these places being advertised for like $10,000 a night, $5,000 a night, and no tax. So stay tuned, and I'm particularly interested, I'm going to give you a hint, in Harbor Island.
So, Mr. Strawn,
Sorry, go ahead.
Just get a little question on here, just to understand. So, you're sending out lists starting in September. Do you want liquor stores to go be proactive and start registering now? And if so, what is the portal? You mentioned the portal.
Right, so for the liquor portal, that'll be available the 1st of September, right? So the 1st of September, the liquor portal will be available. We'll of course do, yeah. You go on Inland Revenue site and you will see, number one, the guidance notes for liquor establishments. And then you will see news about the link, but the portal will not be active until the 1st of September.
Okay, and vacation rentals?
Yeah, that portal, that's the old portal. That's been there from
It's on the
2023.
site.
It's on the site.
All right.
Yes.
So, Mr. Strawn, your department is obviously involved in the budget process, the budget planning for Can you speak to this matter with the Prime Minister projecting the surplus in April? And that being different?
That's the Ministry of Finance could speak to that. We are not involved at that level. We carry out the policy, but in terms of putting the numbers together, no. We're told, though, what we have to collect, right? So we have a budget, we have a target that we have to go at, I should say. But we're not involved in that area.
How have back collections been going for the year? Have you seen it, I guess, increase collections since last year, and are we meeting our targets?
We're close, but we could be better. And again, for us, it's about working with businesses, because I just had a conversation with the taxpayer just yesterday. The VAT money is not your money, right? You collect VAT, so in other words, you're holding your money, the taxpayer's money, on behalf of them. So you cannot factor that into your working capital. That can't be a part of how you pay salaries and how you pay your utilities. And I just want to tell businesses, if you find it difficult collecting it and putting it in the same account as your money, then put it in a separate account. You're free to pay VAT every day, right? If you have a challenge holding on to it, then, like I have some taxpayers, they go to the bank, they put it in the bank every day, they transfer it out. They said they don't want to see it because it's not theirs. So again, it's encouraging businesses to take seriously that they are a trustee on behalf of the Bahamian people to hold the money. It's not their money. And so it's been doing better, but it can do even more better, right? Yeah, so we're gonna put some emphasis there. And we're also putting emphasis in the Family Island. So honestly, there's a concern with businesses in the Family Islands. So we're gonna have to find a way to touch the islands more. We do have offices in some of our islands. We have Freeport, or I should say Grand Bahama, Abaco, Exuma, and Eleuthera. But we have to often send compliance officers because we don't have a full complement in those islands. So there's a lot of work to be done in the Family Islands, especially around short-term vacation properties and like that whole touring thing, like boats and jet skis and them type of thing. Yeah, we got to do some work in those areas. So that's it for me. So I, again, thank the public for their help, and thank you for getting the word out. And I just want to encourage, my Bahamian people, help us collect your taxes, and it'll lighten the load for you, right? Thank you, and have a good day.
All right. Thank you again, Ms. Strawn. Always very helpful, very comprehensive. Thanks again. Just one quick announcement for me. As you probably know, there was another round of power outages on the island of Eleuthera where there have been challenges. I just want to say that the power has been restored there, according to information given, and where the power has not been restored, an estimated time for that power restoration was given to affected residents. Now, I am told that there were two reasons for that power outage yesterday. One had to do with damage to the roof of the power station in Hatchet Bay. Apparently there was a huge downpour there, and a roof already compromised was further compromised, and officials sprung into action to ensure that the equipment there was safeguarded. There was also an instance yesterday where a dump truck interacted with a power line, and that led to further problems with power generation. But as regards to Eleuthera, all hands are on deck. It is an area that BPL is working on. It's also one of the areas where the power generation demands have really outstripped the demand in that area. It is a growing area. People are moving in such a way that the demand is really growing. But all hands are on deck on the island of Eleuthera to ensure that the power stays on, and certainly that going forward, the system can handle the demand that's now required. So that's a work in progress. Are there any other questions? Here we see you looking at me.
The Beaches and Parks Authority exceeded its 2024-2025 budget by at least $7 million. What accounts for this? Does the authority intend to account for its spending? And can you arrange for the chairman to come to an OPM press briefing?
I can arrange for that, because I cannot answer any of those questions on their budgeting and what their expectations are, but I can certainly arrange for that, yes.
Yesterday evening, the Prime Minister said he never said there was a surplus for the month of April 2025, but he in fact did. Why couldn't the Prime Minister remember his own words?
I will not add to what the Prime Minister has said or take away from anything that he has said. Suffice it to say, however, the administration is working on improving the economic state and has been since day one. And that is the focus of the administration, lowering the deficit, putting the country back on a good economic footing. It's been doing that since day one, and we expect to continue to see that realized. It was, of course, one of the focuses of the budget, which wrapped up last month, and in the year ahead, we hope to see all of the things certainly related to improving the economic state of the country realized.
To that last question, so the press club put out a statement demanding a apology not only to The Guardian but other media outlets after the PM actually went after The Guardian for reporting the surplus, which was in the Ministry of Finance report. So is the PM going to say anything, address that matter again, considering how vigorously he went after the editor?
Well, I can't say yay or nay on that.
Is there any idea where the breakdown happened? Was it a speech writing issue? Was it an issue with wrong information from Inland Revenue or Ministry of Finance or did the Ministry of Finance make their projections with outdated software?
And I hesitate to answer that, Yuri, because the responses are dependent on the question that's asked. And I don't want to give a response that may conflate a matter that's obviously a complex matter and a lot of questions may be asked on. I'm a reporter myself. I don't want to I don't think it's helpful for me to add to confusion. But of course, any questions on those numbers and specifics can be directed to the Ministry of Finance.
Do they have a press liaison you could talk to? Because I don't think I can get an answer from anybody else.
I'll find out for you.
New U.S. tariffs took effect today. Any concessions or relief the government have in place for Bahamian business owners?
Well, that is something the government continues to monitor, and as information is, of course, forwarded, and as things develop on the U.S. side, we will, of course, pivot, and information will be forwarded on to you.
Also, is the government moving any step closer to bringing some sort of cohesion of, I would guess, commitment with the Jonkunu community? There's been ongoing back and forth between the government and that sector.
Well, meetings are planned. As you know, Jonkunu is going through a transition period. The authority is pending. A consultation is about to get started very shortly. I think a statement was issued on that today. But again, the focus is on improving Jonkunu. The government has no intention of taking over Jonkunu or taking power away from the JCNP, which is obviously the body mandated to control Jonkunu and enjoy Jonkunu for the benefit of the public. It is hoped that during the course of those consultations that all of that will be sorted out and we will have a happy ending. I think that we will.
Last question on the whole surplus thing. I had the answer you gave to Yuri, and I think it's a fair answer, but people could say it's not a good look that the PM said one thing in his budget communication, but then there's like mixed messaging. What do you say to people who feel like there's something that just isn't adding up with this whole situation?
That I will not add to conflating the issue. All right, any further questions? Thank you all so much. Thank you again. Thank you again, Ms. Strawn, and have a good day, everyone.